In this video I want to have a look at some of the old armories of North America. This one in Louisville. Now the story that goes with these armories is that there were munitions depots, training centers, and things like that. Often built like castles, and it's funny how the architecture remains consistent, whether it's Canada or the US, although the whole military apparatus, Canada obviously being linked with British military, and then of course the US military being what it is. This in New York. There are many of these in New York. This is also New York. I just wanted to bring you some visuals that I found, and then tie them into the narrative that I usually like to bring you, with the suggestion that what we're looking at is or are repurposed buildings from an old world, what we call the old world. Especially when you look at something like this, Jersey City, looking very old, textured, castle-like. And I understand the argument, how people say, well, you had to protect these, so they had to build them like castles. Sure, I get that. But I also think that can be used, and is being used, to explain away what we're seeing. This one, the 71st Regiment New York, really a spectacular building. Deserves its own video. Torn down in the 60s, maybe early 70s. I think 60s. And we'll just stay on this 71st Regiment building. I've got a few more. Not a lot. Not easy to find. The front entry of the building. I just want you to take a look at what we're dealing with here. They're saying this was built in the early 1900s. And just look at the size of what we're seeing as the stonework. Just really feels the depth of it. The texture of it feels like it's been there for much longer than that. This one's showing a subway entrance just outside. A couple photos. There's one just at the top. And then why do you need to build a tower? And then why would you have torn it down? You know, that seems absurd to me, as usual. Another one from the entrance, and again you have the vastness, the size of this is what really gets me. And what also gets me too is we're talking about a building that was supposedly built early 1900s, and again you have all infrastructure in place and looking well established surrounding the building. So we always get the narrative, there was a fire, there was something that happened, and they tore it down, built a new one, had to, it was getting too busy and needed more room, things like that. And I wish I could find some photos from the interior of this one. There weren't any, but they do describe it as being quite ornate with the woodwork. Here is one of the other entrances, and then look at the stonework here again. This is impeccable work right here. I don't know if you're familiar with stonework and how that works, but this seam here should really jump out at you as something that we don't see. Well, we do see often in a lot of these older photos, but it's not something we duplicate or even try to these days because of the precision. I think that's needed. There's something going on here. And then you have, of course, the wrought iron gates. So there's a repurposing, I think, of what once was into what makes sense for the narrative that we attribute to it now. And we move on to other armories. I've got all sorts of postcards and old photos from around North America. I won't be able to show all of them in this video. It'll be too long, but just wanted to give you a taste of what we're dealing with. And here we see again the texture lower down. You also see very inconsistent floor or ground levels Here you have a bit of that mud flood look going on. This one in Chicago, very unique shape. Another one in Chicago. And the fact of the matter is they're all over the place. So definitely worth a look. Interesting town, Holyoke, Massachusetts. I'll have a video coming on that town or small city shortly as well. Another armory. And I read a little write-up about the Canadian armories and how it was almost a flair of the architect to build them like a castle with all of their personality. So the architect, whoever designed this one, sure felt like they needed to add the flair, didn't they? Rochester, New York again, riddled with these. Got the basement windows. This one in Akron, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio. Again, the castle, the circular entrances. Something about these buildings. And what was their original purpose? I have questions. I have doubts. And that's what I do here on this channel, is I bring you those doubts and questions and let you fill in the blanks. I just want to show you the visuals. Share with you what I found. Consistently too with the basement window. So automatically the assumption now has to be that this building goes down into the ground, which means there had to be quite an excavation involved. And also the assumption has to be that if some of these, the ones that are still standing today, are still standing and are not compromised structurally, then they would have had to have been excavated properly to give them that longevity in stability in their structure. This one in Batavia, I'm not sure what that is. Richmond, Virginia, really. A little flare going on there too, right? So these are all things to consider when we're looking back at these old buildings. It's not just the production of the materials. It has a lot to do with the ability and time frame to construct these operations, to dig out to create a stable foundation for these buildings, and then of course to go up vertically. Those are the two major challenges that we've gotten over in the modern day through machines. And that, I think, is one of the largest obstacles. Of course, again, the quality of craftsmanship. So the quality exterior, and of course the interior quality that we see in a lot of these old buildings is nothing comes close to it these days. Even with the technology we have, CNC machines, things like that, we can duplicate small aspects, and there are reproductions and people that dedicate themselves to that. But this was going on a grand scale. So you would have had the people that were building the structures, and you would have had the people that were finishing the structures. And I would suggest that we're not talking about the same people. Those are expertise that are fairly specific. Although this is in Ontario, Cambridge, Ontario. It's possible, and I'm not giving them enough credit to people of this time period. Of course, most of what we're looking at here attributed to, I'd say, between 1850 and 1915, all of these buildings. It's the same timeline that you see for all the other different types of buildings. So, very, very, very busy time. Of course, you have the population boom. And are we to assume that the population that was booming in all these locations was just skilled in these areas, and they just added their skill, and it just, that uniformity of architecture just sort of became a part of the culture, no matter where they were from, whether the settlers were from the German settlers, the Irish settlers, right? Italian settlers. So, things to consider, right? There's holes. I think there are many holes in the historical narrative, and they're worth pointing out, and they're worth questioning, and that's what we're doing here. And if you're into that, then you'll definitely like what I bring to the table, and I definitely invite you to add your input. This one in Chicago, Cincinnati, Cleveland, so many. Another one in Cleveland. This is what it looks like in a modern day photograph. Again, we're looking at that arch work, and look at the stonework here. Right now, we're looking at some sort of veneer on top of red brick, possible. I don't really know, or did they begin these builds with stone and then shift into red brick? But then it gets confusing, because then we look at what's going on here, and there's sort of a in-between phase here, and then have to weave all that together. Very decorative here. So more questions than answers. New York really featuring this, really unbelievable. Chicago. This Chicago. Well, I think I'll end with this one. I do have a lot more. Maybe there'll be a part 2 for armories. But I wanted to bring you what I found from North America specifically, and I wanted to share my thoughts on what we see from this time period, what we're told, and the differences between the two. So, thanks for watching. If you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe.